I just want to be in a room with all of you. If this was a dinner party guest sort of scenario, I think one of the reasons we have gravitated towards this constellation of people is that we all have a passion and affinity for, and maybe some sort of obsession with creating, producing, being involved with very complex artworks that take a lot of effort, a lot of technical effort, a lot of production effort, a lot of organization, and a lot of the works that we all participate in fall out of the sort of traditional art infrastructures that we've seen in the past. And so a lot of us pulling from very unordinary places to make our works come to life. And so, should we do intros? Okay. Yeah. We're like, is it too formal to do an intro? Let's do intros.
Just so everyone knows where everyone else is coming from. And on that note of like, we all like doing the possible things. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, I just want to say first off, you guys look like fabulous. I love you guys look so great. Love like the black and the white, vibe. Okay, anyways, yeah, and thank you so much for organizing this. I'm super excited to be on this panel with all these industry thought leaders. I was looking you guys up before, so I'm really happy to be, in this digital room with you guys. My name's Raina Mehler. I'm a director at Superblue, which is a nascent company that maybe not a lot of people have heard about yet, but you will. And it's this new enterprise dedicated to producing, presenting, and exhibiting immersive and experiential art. We just opened our inaugural show in Miami. It opened at the end of May. And it's in this 50,000 square foot warehouse across the street from the Rubel Museum in Alapata, Miami. Superblue was founded by Mark Lemcher, who's the president and CEO of Pace Gallery New York, and Molly Dent Brocklehurst, who's the former president of Pace London. And so our first show has James Turrell, T-Mob, and Ez Devlin in it. And my role at Superblue is to work closely with the artists from, realizing their work from, really working with them from the inception of an idea, like all the way to realizing it on site. Whether that's at an experiential art center, which is what we're kind of dubbing these venues as, or if it's sold or commissioned, or if we loan it to a museum. And previously, I was at Pace Gallery for 8 years. At Pace, I did, at Superblue, I'm on the logistics side. So contracts, insurance, packing and shipping, production, installation, all the really fun, sexy stuff. So.
And manuals, right?
And manuals
and documentation and archiving, yeah. Conservation maintenance, so all of that fun stuff.
Amazing. Cool. And who's going next?
I'll jump in. My name is Todd Eckert. I'm the president and founder of Tin Drum. So we're making experiences, and there's not really a good moniker for it. So it's mixed reality or augmented reality. We use devices, always pass through, never VR, to create performances and installations and experiences that are not possible in any other way. So the first piece that we put out was with Marina Abramovich. It's called The Life. This is the one that premiered at the Serpentine in 2019. And sold at Christie's the end of last year. We exhibited in Los Angeles, where you guys actually saw it. And it was supposed to be in New York. The pandemic got us, but we were in that moment between the initial lockdown and the next lockdown. We were actually able to exhibit in London at Christie's for 3 weeks. And it's going on. It'll open in Germany in July, in Brooklyn the end of the year. We're currently in production of a piece with the London Design Festival that'll open at the V&A in this coming September with the architect Sue Fujimoto. And last December, we volumetrically shot the legendary pianist Ryuichi Sakamoto. And that's a 75-minute piece that'll open the beginning of next year. And really everything that we do is meant to create a kind of more intimate relationship between an artist and an audience. So the idea of digital content or any sort of nascent technology for us is valuable only if it affords us a better or deeper experience. And so that kind of motivates everything that we have done and will do. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. And I love that. And I want to come back to that as well, the idea of using technology, and it's exciting and it's complex, but also technology being a medium and not, you know, the point of the work itself, but a vessel in order to, like Todd said, bridge an artist and an audience, or bridge people together. And I think sometimes we can get distracted with technology or news or firsts, but returning back to why are we doing this and why does it matter? Why should we try so hard? And it's because it does bring new possibilities that otherwise wouldn't exist. So, cool. Who next?
Yeah, I can go next. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm Irini Papadimitriou, and I'm currently the creative director at FutureEverything. And we are a creative and curatorial studio, and basically we work with artists, but also with art organizations and different sectors as well to create art experiences. We don't have a venue, but we work a lot in collaboration with other people. We also work a lot in the public realm in terms of kind of putting work out there in the world, but also in non-art domains as well. My background is in digital culture, and working actually, I would like to think of me like my background is like curatorial, but I ended up working with many artists who end up using technology in their work. But a lot of the work that I've been doing, and also we have been doing at FutureEverything, is also it's of course bringing art experiences to the public, but we also want to enable critical conversations to happen. And this is very central to the work that we do, mainly thinking about technologies like occupying more and more of our kind of society and environment and world. So we are very interested in bringing in work together that questions very much society and technological worlds as well. We've done some of the projects that we did recently. Actually, it's not so recent, but with the pandemic, it feels like like the world has stopped. It was Raphael Lozano-Hemmer's latest kind of installation, Atmospheric Memory, which was an amazing experience and massive scale project that we presented with Manchester International Festival and Science and Industry Museum here in Manchester. Also Helen Knowles' installation Trickle Down, a new vertical sovereignty, which we are touring and we managed to present just before the pandemic. And currently working on a massive scale a group exhibition, which is going to be outdoors in Athens for the Onassis Foundation, and is exploring society and the world through algorithmic lens. So so I'm looking forward to our conversation, and thank you again for having me here.
Great, thank you, Irini. Super exciting. And Anne.
Hi. Sorry in advance for the slight echo in background. It's a huge living room. I'm at Somerset House for the Biennale. So so it's I'm in a meeting room, so hence the echo. So hopefully that will be okay.
Congrats, by the way.
Oh yeah, congrats. Anne has a really cool piece at the Biennale right now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Raina, it's actually S. Devlin who's the creative director. So I actually met one of your colleagues.
Carlotta?
Yes.
Yeah,
because she was having. Sorry, we're gossiping. You said there was a salon.
Gossiping is totally welcome.
But yeah, she was having, I think, a drink with Studio Irini. And obviously I worked with Studio Irini as well. So yes.
cool.
Well, here we go.
I am dying to see both of Ez's pieces, the one in Miami and the one at Somerset House. If the UK could get their quarantine thing together, I've got to get to England. I just don't have 5 days.
Don't tell me, like it's crazy because obviously it's a Biennale and you're supposed to have all the artists here, but no one's here. I mean, obviously the curators are here, but most of the, my designer couldn't come.
Yeah.
And it's quite crazy because you have a lot of creativity, but you don't have the actual artists or designers on site. So there's really something missing, it's a little odd. Yeah. So I agree with you, Todd.
Yeah, no, I actually, to try to will it to happen, I bought a ticket for the 23rd in the belief that on the 21st, they'll actually come up with a thing that says, no, you're vaccinated, you're fine.
I know it's quite bizarre with the whole vaccination thing, but so my name is Anne-Laure Pingreoun. I'm a design curator and strategy consultant. I'm based in London, but I work all over. I'm the founder of Alter Projects. We're a multidisciplinary company, and we specialize in the creation of unique cultural programs for brands. We work with institutions, with developers, with estates. So it's varied, really. And since we started 7 years ago, we tend to work with upcoming and also obviously renowned international artists. Same thing than what we've just heard from all of you guys. One of the key things is always for us to kind of push the status quo in all the projects that we do. So whether it's, it uses technology, for me, it's not the end, goal. It's always it's always whatever, is there to enhance and make the experience great, and also just create like a really interesting connection with either the community if it's outside, or the visitors if it's in an institution. In terms of work, I was the global lead curator for ADO by Mini for a few years, and I had a chance to commission quite a few people, UVA, Studio Irini, Studio Swine, Fernando Mastrangelo, you girls, Ania and Dejha. And obviously more recently, we've actually done some work with Grosvenor Estates on the public arts realm side of things. So within Mayfair and Belgravia. We commissioned Camille Walala to work on South Molton Street and actually just redo the entire street, and on a really interesting project to bring more people to the space. And then we just finished last year actually an outdoor art trail called Wonder Arts with 11 site-specific art installations throughout, again, Mayfair and Belgravia, with the goal to kind of bring some joy and bring life back into the city center of London. So that was really cool. And then we have another installation actually just launching just before LDF at the end of August, again in Mayfair. And then I am currently at Somerset House because we are exhibiting and we're doing a special project called Metronome at the London Design Biennale. And then the last point is last year we also launched during the pandemic Alternative Thinkers, which is an alternative alliance of minds coming together to implement change on a global level. So that's me.
I'm so sad ADO closed.
I know.
It's like heartbreaking.
Right before ADO closed, a couple months prior, because we were working on our commission, which ADO basically
it was the last commission of ADO before it closed.
Yeah, and it was going into fabrication, I think the following Monday, and then it was, the designs were complete, but it never got built. But I think in that time period, Raina, we were talking about reminds me of this conversation about manuals, and you're like, okay, I'm explaining to collectors how to operate their work that they're about to own, and I have to give them this manual. And it's kind of like, that's kind of the thing you do if you like build an app and give them a retainer, and it's just like this very unsexy thing. And Ania and I and our friend Paul, who Todd you met, and we have this game where it's like, what what things don't you want to be corporate?
And what things are okay to be corporate?
Like muffins are something you don't want to be.
You
corporate.
never want a corporate muffin, but
Yeah.
like a corporate mattress is okay.
Yeah.
And like, you know, like there's just certain things that are like okay to be corporate and certain things not. So on this idea of like the idea of art with manuals and why and how this changes the nature of art being this beautiful, ethereal, cultural wonder, you know, from something that's like, what, I have to do this? Wait, the art broke? Like, what do you mean? You know? So can we, what do you,
Actually, what things first, what things should have manuals and what things shouldn't have manuals?
Yeah, and also warranties, because people are like,
Yeah. What things, even outside of art, what things should have warranties and manuals and what things shouldn't?
should a muffin have a manual?
So you've reminded me, a long time ago, I started my career as a journalist, and I was interviewing a band called Cocteau Twins, and Elizabeth Fraser, who is one of the most wonderful people you've ever met, but she had a manual for absolutely everything. So she had instructions for how does the toaster work, and they would be detailed, and they would be, and every facet of her existence included a manual. I thought it was brilliant. You know, it's like, if UI is sufficient, then there should never be a manual, because there shouldn't have to be one. But since it almost never is, it's like, okay, somewhere maybe there should be one. I don't know. We had to figure that out last year when we sold the Life, because we put, you know, you've got a HoloLens 2, and you've got this box that it came in, it's a really beautiful box. It's like, well, how does it work? So we had to kind of put all of that there, and I don't know. Maybe one day we won't require one.
I think plug and play, which is like collectors' dreams. I hear it all the time. Why can't it run off a Mac Mini or whatever, Mac Pro? Oh, it's using gaming technology, generating the images in real time. It's on a loop. So at Pace, we, and this is continuing at Superblue, but, you know, I had a series of conversations with the sales staff, because, you know, Pace has traditional artwork, you know, and then this new digital artwork. Sorry, my cat's meowing. I hope you guys can't hear. I'm just going to keep talking. Maybe edit this part out.
Our
Okay.
cat might start responding soon.
Yeah, that's, like, I gave him so much food before. I was like, don't bother me. We, you know, it's a balance, right? Because you want the collector to understand, you know, what they're getting into, to be, you know, empowered to take ownership over it. You know, it's going to need replacement parts, routine maintenance. But you don't want them to be intimidated about it. Like, you don't want to scare them off, like, by inundating them with like all this information. So I worked with a team at Pace to come up with this document, which we called Installations Considerations. And we would give it to the sales staff. It was up to them if they wanted to give the document, you know, to the client. We recommended that, but at least educated them when talking to the clients. And this would give like a very basic overview of the equipment. Like, it comes with 4 monitors, 1 computer that's this size, you know, 1 speaker, whatever, really basic, no specs. Then we would also get into, you know, it has internet, it has power, like, you know, basic things that like sometimes people, you know, it seems like so self-evident to us, but like if you've never collected this type of art before, you know, you just don't consider it, oh, I need a hard Ethernet line or whatever. Also the warranty terms, what that means, and then any terms and conditions of the sale. You know, some artists stipulate you can only have 1 on view at any given time, you know, like a painting. So if you loan that artwork, you need to loan the equipment. You can't have it on view, you know, at your home in the museum, or have one at your home in New York and your, you know, vacation home in Miami or whatever. So that, you know, this information that we think is pertinent is very clear to the client before they purchase it. That might even involve a site visit, so that when someone goes to physically install it, there's not any, you know, like hiccups that happen because, oh, it's a historic building, you can't drill into the wall, you know, kind of dealt with all scenarios, places. And then once the work is sold, you know, then I like to be put in touch with, and not, like a collections manager, a registrar, an assistant, project manager, someone that can kind of digest all the details, nuts and bolts of the installation, that is actually there to oversee it. And then, then I talk to them about, hey, like, here's the maintenance, requirements, or here's some troubleshooting tips. I had this one client that called me, and he was like, the artwork's image is only, halfway visible on the screen, and the other part is red, and sending me photos, and, really upset. And I get it. It's super frustrating when it doesn't work, or when you feel like it's not working. And, I talked to him, and I was just like, really politely, like, oh, sir, have you tried restarting the computer? And like that totally solved the problem. And like it kind of, like I think he was a little bit embarrassed. So that's the moment when we started like this troubleshooting.
Was that in the manual?
Well, that was before we started.
That was pre-manual.
That was pre-manual, because there's a,
yeah,
in human computer interaction, there's a thing that we reference called RTFM, which is read the fucking manual.
Yeah,
not to say it applies here or to artworks, or to
yeah. And then we encouraged all the artists to do this, like, and most of them did it. And then we would like add to it, but it would also be like a separate one page, like check the cables, check this, like a kind of checklist, so that before they get to us, they've done all these things. It empowers them to take responsibility of the artwork. We don't want anyone to feel stupid, and it does take some time, to learn it and get comfortable. So we found that to be super kind of successful for us.
What's interesting about all of this is if you look at it, so working in like these kind of nascent technologies, and perhaps even establishing the understanding of the technology in such a way that those who follow will be following this template to a degree. And because these works will exist beyond all of us. So what are the responsibilities for people that create or enable or display or are in some other way part of the process for making certain that the intention of the artwork actually lives beyond our natural lifetimes? And so this is something that with the life we had to do, because we were very specific with how it needs to be presented, and it cannot be presented in any other way. And we actually used the kind of rules of installation from Marcel Duchamp's Attendonnais as a starting point, because that was so specific. And I'm wondering how all of you have encountered that since everybody is creating these amazing works, how are you considering that for when you're not around to tell people to read the fucking manual?
Anne and Irini, either of you have
I'm thinking that, for me, like these manuals, instructions and all that stuff, it's maybe a step to, learn more and be about the work. And also it's about care as well. And it's about, just having this ongoing thing as well. I mean, my background before moving into the curatorial kind of realm was in conservation, like of artworks as well. It was in particular, it started with like medieval actually artworks conservation, and then moved to photography in specific, and moving image works, which was totally like a different world. But it's really different. It was very interesting that it was always about discovering all these layers and trying to get into the mind of the artist in terms of how they created the artwork in order to kind of make sure that you care for it in the best way. And I'm thinking that this is something that in terms of like manuals and learning more about how the work and artwork works as well, it's something that is not just for works that use technology, but it's also for like, other materials as well. Like when artists have been experimenting with so many different materials and very unstable materials, or like living or materials as well. And so I've always considered works as like living kind of things in a way that we have to that, as you said, like Todd, because they go beyond our like lifespans, you know, it's about like creating something that other people can care for them after us as well. So yes, I guess that's the way that I'm trying to see it in a way. But definitely we want like nicely designed instructions, and I mean we work with artworks that we help artists develop and produce and then curate, because we tour them all the time, and then we have to make sure that, you know, we create ways for people that are readable, that are accessible, that are easy to understand as well, and that they want to, that they don't look at something and say, oh my God, I can't deal with this. You know, so it's just something that, you know, makes them learn more basically about the work and makes their work easy. I think Raffaello Zanno-Hemmer is one artist that has been doing amazing work in terms of thinking about maintenance and like preservation of his work, and also creating manuals in terms of like, you know, that collectors can kind of use to, you know, to have this connection with his work, but to also make sure that it makes sense.
Yeah, I love it being like about care. And for some reason, obviously, like care doesn't necessarily mean emotional care, but also it kind of does. And it's thinking like, this isn't ugly and messy. It's like, I don't have a child, but maybe like having a child that you have to care for and do these things to allow it to, you know, express itself. And I think it's nice to frame it as a version of caring for the artwork and living with the artwork, rather than it being like this annoying thing you have to do things for in order for it to, you know, make you happy or impress the people that come over. You know, it's an interesting framing. Care.
Totally. I think artists, and I've worked with some of, you know, some artists previously on this, but you know, part of the contract or the purchase agreement, you know, you could build in instructions that, you know, you'll maintain the work for X amount of money, because it does put it's your time, right, to put in energy to figure out the problem, etc. And so it's just like when you have a car and you need to take it to the auto shop to get repairs, like you have to pay someone to do that work and the time. And so, and I think artists hate that comparison, but just like to put in real world example that like, I think artists should get paid for their time working on maintenance. And I think that's something, you know, some artists offer it for free, you know, remote support or whatever, but I think there should be some compensation. And you could be upfront with that. Like I've done it with artists to build in, you know, for 2 years, we get X amount of money. This is the level of service we provide. If it's anything else needed, you know, travel costs are included, you know, and then in 2 years, you kind of reassess. But that's what I would recommend, because it does take time and energy and resources.
Absolutely. I think in terms of maintenance, I mean, for me, it's funny. I have a different experience with mineral. Like for me, it's always interesting to see, like you girls were saying, you know, it's like a baby, but I think then it shows how you are as a parent, you know, because some of them, I've seen manuals that are like 300 pages worth of, you know, details. And then I've seen manuals that were 20 pages, not even, you know, 5 pages of, I'm done with that piece, you know, good luck with it. Call me if you have any issues. It's quite interesting. Then you kind of get into the mind of the artist at that point of, you know, or some artists also, like I remember, I'm not gonna name who, but took like 3 months, the piece was already up and took 3 months to give us the manual after it was actually up, just because they wanted to be super thorough, but they also they really cared about doing the right thing and designing it properly and so on, which, you know, was great. But not everyone's like that. And I think also there's a learning curve with, obviously, when you work with established and upcoming, you know, you have, it's when suddenly they get a bigger commission or something they've never done before, and you have to kind of really work with them in terms of the manual side of things, definitely.
Speaking of what Raina said earlier, and not overwhelming people and having people look at what's there, or maybe it was Irini, but just being like, oh no, I don't want to, like, never mind, you know. Have any of you, I mean, specifically maybe Irini and Anne being curators, and working with institutions and deciding, you know, which works are shown. Have you had something that you wanted to show that it was like, once they saw what it was going to take, or if it stretched their resources too much, it was like, never mind, can you just get something a little more simple that we don't have to think too much about? Has that happened?
I have worked with artists where, for example, we commissioned work in the past as well, in different spaces. And even like, working with artists, developing a new work for, let's say, for a project that I did at the V&A, or even like in other places, Watermans, etc. And it sometimes it was, yes, there, because there were these restrictions, for example. I think it depends on like the purpose as well, and the context. For example, like if it was, it has happened that we developed work with artists that was almost at a prototype level, not at a level that it was, this work was then robust enough to, let's say, get acquired by the collection, or so. But then, that was kind of, you know, a conscious decision, because we knew that we had like very limited resources, and it was something that it was for, let's say, a short-term event. But then I have come across like also, especially working with younger, like emerging artists, where sometimes, you know, asking them questions like, for example, you know, what happens to your work in 50, 100, 200 years time, and then they realize that, oh, actually it's not going to exist, because this is not going to exist after 2 years, or like we are building this artwork, it goes to this exhibition and then to another exhibition, and that's it, that's the end of its life. So there are many times that artists, you know, they want to, they do like they have this desire to create new work, to build new, but that doesn't mean that it's going to stay. So, and it's a matter of like, you know, what resource do you have? Can you, can you create something that then is ready to go to a collection? That hasn't been always the case with like my experience, like working with artists. But that didn't stop us, for example, like from making something. It was clear that these needed to be developed in a different way if it was for longer term.
Yeah, I mean, there's the same experience with me. And obviously, like, there's a lot of, when you create something that is extremely site specific, and also if it's something like we've done that is in the public realm for 2 years outside, I mean, you know, that's also another, so, you know, on my side, it has completely depended on the project, really. But because we also do, it's very rare that we get asked. I mean, I'm usually the one who starts the project and then try to make it tour or get someone to acquire it. But again, it's a bit different when you work with more upcoming artists. I would say it's a different, I mean, I wish all of them would go into collection, but it's not usually. Yeah.
Something that I've ran into is this idea of like touring shows, like the transportability of an installation when it's made for a particular site, because it's not like you can just, not always, but like just pack it up easily and like off it goes. It's like, well, how is the projectors supported by the trust, or, you know, like what's the sound of the next venue? So I'm just would love to hear kind of your thoughts or suggestions about this idea of portability, of kind of transporting it from site to site, and what challenges, you know, that's come up for you guys, and what kind of solutions maybe you have come into.
It's funny because we're dealing with it right now, with like if you think about any work, for the most part, you want it to be seen by as broad an audience as possible. And since we're working in mixed reality, and this, like, that entire template of experience changes as more devices come out, as they become simpler to use, as they become less expensive. And the idea is one of not just, I don't know, massive or predictable institutions having the work, but at what point can you use the digital nature, the kind of transferable nature of the work, and put it into communities that have not historically had access to work like this. And and it's really, really hard because you don't have a template for anything. So like if you make a work in a traditional medium, so if you use film or video or something like that, it's actually understood, whether it's duplication or presentation or device acquisition or whatever it is, what it's going to take to tour that work, and even what a word like tour means, it's kind of understood. Where if you're taking something and it's a representation of the human form, and that form also requires a certain distance for the audience from the event, so to speak, how can you present it in such a way that like what it costs to make it, the size of the audience that can see it, how can that all become a process of predictability? And how can you refine that predictability over time so you can service communities that have not historically been serviced? And we're finding it's actually it's sharing information. It's talking to people. I mean, I think we have a kind of commonality in this salon, and that all of us sound as if we are motivated by creating things that, I don't know, elevate the human spirit. The idea that you can evolve the relationship of art, in this case in a digital form, simply because that's what we're all working in, but to create experiences that are more reachable, that are more accessible. And so even though these templates or these bases don't necessarily exist yet, I think by virtue of just saying, all right, we're going to figure it out, and maybe we will, and maybe in trying to do so, we'll do something and it won't be perfect, which means we'll just have to make it better. I mean, if I think about what the MIF is doing, if I think about what is going on in Somerset House, if I think about what's going on in Miami, you guys are all doing work that in 5-10 years time, people are going to look at it and they're absolutely going to steal your ideas for the betterment of humanity. And I think that's how it all works.
Absolutely. I mean, I join you 300%. Well, when it comes also to, and I think that's probably also what differs slightly from my work to some of you guys. I think, you know, what really matters to me at the end is for the work to actually go back, like not necessarily to an institution, but to the community. I'd be thrilled, and most of the designers and artists I work with, you know, would love to have actually the artwork to end up in a hospital or in a school, or, you know, and it's a different take than from, you know, actually what might be the traditional, you know, touring of an artwork. But it's a nice way also to kind of make it more accessible to the masses, because I think, you know, and that's what technology enables us to do, you know. Like I was showing again around the Biennale, and obviously there's that digital component to that all of us have done, just in case, again, you know, the Biennale was cancelled last minute, we had something, you know, digital to showcase, because otherwise we've all done all that work for nothing again. So, you know, how yeah, like all of that kind of enables us to then touch a wider audience. Otherwise, imagine if you didn't have that here, like we would only have the London crowd really to see the Biennale, whereas here we're reaching far more people. And also, like, technology, I think, enables to translate something that might be a bit complicated, you know, to describe, of maybe someone to experience in real life, whereas, you know, online it can be actually a lot easier for someone to comprehend. So yeah, and that's beauty of it all.
Raina, I've been thinking a lot about this question that you're asking around just even the practicality of touring, and, you know, this projector needs to be X amount of lumens in this sort of space, but we don't have that much throw. So we need, you know, because the next venue has a shorter throw distance. So we need a different lens and all of these things. And how do we package and move all of this stuff? And I think that, you know, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, because the entertainment industry has totally figured this out, right? Like if you think of like the you know, I'm thinking of a company like Tate Towers, who puts on like Super Bowls and Cirque du Soleil and flying people and all this stuff. And they have a manual for this. There's a way it happens. It's just sort of science and secondhand nature at this point. And I think about this, there's two things I want to bring up here. One is we should get back to Ez Devlin, as she is someone who has created stadium tours and has loads of experience in designing complex stage systems, and those are going on tour. And how does that's a very unique and rare and inaccessible tool set that not many artists have. I think that's really interesting, unique, and we're seeing how art stacks, which if Kate Watson was here, there is something I really love in Serpentine's 2020 August paper about new art, future art ecosystems, about advanced technologies, and this idea of like pulling from different industries like the entertainment industry or from big tech in order to support new works. And I think a lot too about our work on View, which was commissioned by the SCAD Museum of Art. This is a large scale work. Irini, I think we presented this when we were at Known Origins Festival in Manchester a few years ago, where we met in that dark basement. I remember it was like the first iteration. It was so lovely. And we were presenting this, and I think afterwards we were talking about, you're like, have you ever thought of touring something like this? And we're like, oh my gosh.
We lost like intestines just trying to make it. So
yeah.
We didn't think past, just getting that.
But like that's its own job in itself. But when I think about that specific project, which was, the team was comprised of over 25, 30 people. The fabrication team alone was about 10 people, and they were grown men, strong men working for, I think, 3 weeks building this thing that we've invented. It was the SCAD's installation team, which they were like, okay, what are you making? This is crazy. You know what I mean? We're used to installing, even advanced works, but it was purely experiential. And our team, our lighting designer, Seth Bernstein,
he's a lighting designer for Saturday Night Live.
Yeah,
so we were literally pulling from like all over our friends
experiential
in the
marketing
world.
Right. And also our one of our 3D drafters, Leticia Leon, she does only stadium tours and only experiential marketing. And so this is really helpful when you're in, Savannah and we have to source this particular type of flooring with this particular type of finish, and it's seamed a certain way, and you're worried about egress and ADA compliant. And these are, this is all stuff that the industry of entertainment has sorted, and rock shows and everything. And so for us and our medium, we're pulling heavily from the entertainment industry. Todd, I think also about the work that you're doing, this is kind of, when I look at the images that you texted yesterday in the green screen room, like this is like a giant, complex, fancy set, that is probably something out of like future Hollywood, you know what I mean? Where and this stuff is expensive too. And so.
Well, yeah, I mean, it all is. But I mean, if you think about everybody that you just referenced in talking about your Georgia show, and the funny thing about that is all of those industries spent years figuring it out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm probably the oldest person on this call. When you would go and see a stadium tour in, let's say, the 80s, it sucked. All of the visuals. I mean, there's a reason that bands were shooting fire up into the air. It's not because it's compelling. It's because they could. And the video projections and all of this, like nobody got projection mapping in a live setting right until Eamon Tobin did it with ISAM, and that's 10 years ago. So and like if you think about all of this, it is decades of failure of trying to figure out how to do this and falling on your face until you actually go through the process of, okay, I think we've got it. Hold on. And it's like if you look at Ez Devlin's work, Ez is a genius because the curiosity that you get, that it's so apparent when you talk to her, is something that she gives. She like, every person in every audience of whatever thing it is that she's doing feels as if their natural curiosity that they've had since they were a baby is somehow fulfilled. She just does it with these big, glorious, wonderful set pieces. So, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's these giant, massive lumen things, but it's still informed by what somebody felt when they were a baby and thought, wow, light's really neat. So like all of these digital attributes, all of these things that we're making, yeah, I mean, I know that we will get there. But if you think about it, like, okay, here's a question. Maybe we can start with your piece at SCAD. So when you think about making this big, complex thing, even before you get to the idea of touring it, what appealed to you about making this thing? What was it that ultimately motivated you to make this one thing that required 3 weeks of lots of people to construct it? And was it ultimately a success for the vision that you had that you put into it? And I would ask all of you like this kind of question.
Well, I think that it's something that you have to talk to artists about upfront, is this idea of portability. Because I think it's very hard after the fact to try to disassemble it. Because there's lots of objects, like I'm working on something now where the artist is like, oh, we can assemble that on site, but once it's assembled, we can't disassemble it. And I'm like, well, it's like a 20-foot object. So I'm like, we need to now factor in crating, like costs, and then shipping it back to Europe. Like that's this whole thing that hadn't been budgeted for. So I think it's something that at Superblue and me personally, I think this idea of modularity and portability needs to be discussed from the front. And then you really have to work with a team of experts who've been doing it forever, as you referenced. Like we used at Superblue an AV integrator, Electrosonic, and they do Disney, like 360-degree projections. So we relied heavily on their knowledge and experience of that. And then also with the fabricators. And then you just need like a really awesome producer, project manager to like tie everything in, like the construction people. And you can't have like contractors that build like apartment buildings. There needs to be like this nuance and complication of like many parts that are then fabricated all over the world that need to be like assembled, the AV integration part, and it's just so many types of people, and then time to troubleshoot and all of that. So for me, I think it's like a seed I want to plant, like right when we're talking about the idea, because for Superblue, one of our goals is once we commission a piece, it goes in our venue. We want that then to tour to other venues. And we're really thinking about like regional museums that don't have, the financial ability to finance a production like this because it's so cost prohibitive. And then that will also help, these museums kind of bring in new younger audiences or maybe like revive it in different ways. And, and then hopefully, find it a home at like a really awesome collector institution or something. So that's like our long-term, vision and goal. But I think, it's just something that has to be really thought out from the beginning in the design phase. And what we're now talking about is maximum and minimum like scale requirements for the artist without it losing like the artistic intent or integrity, like the scalability of it or variation to then, fit it. Or we're thinking more like, okay, the room has to be this size to fit this artwork, like something where you can then talk to institutions and see if it would fit as like a starting point, because it's been really tricky when you have, sculptural elements and equipment and the kind of IT AV infrastructure you need. So we're figuring it out, but it takes a village.
No, I totally agree with you. It has to be from the start and from the first brief and discussion you're having with them. There's another element as well, which is quite interesting, is obviously, especially with institutions obviously not you guys at all, but you know, the more kind of traditional institutions, and it's the lack of knowledge around technology, and that actually pushed me to have someone, and the girls know him, like a CTO, basically consulting with me all the time, because I'm not, you know, I'm not an expert, and then there's no one actually being able to answer either my questions or the artist's questions on the other side. So it's actually having, you know, should we have that more prominent, like whether it's, again, especially institutions, but having CTOs on board that are able to look at, you know, a project and advise, or also bring some interesting partners or production partners, you know, to the table, instead of just, you know, potentially an electrician, because that's what you get, but that's not, you know, that's not necessarily the answer. Yeah, so that's the question of it to you guys. What has been your experience around that throughout the years?
I've been working, I mean, I used to work at the V&A for many years, and curating some of the digital programs there. And I mean, it's been really interesting. I mean, the V&A, maybe it's not the best example, because we were so lucky to have this culture of like, being able to experiment and do things, but it was often like, also, what you were saying, it is like being in a traditional institution, it was quite difficult sometimes to communicate all this and understand, like, you know, and also so many things to consider in terms of risks, in terms of like bringing this massive installation scene that was really crazy, and having to mount things, and sometimes not having doors big enough to get the you know, the objects go through, and having to, you know, just go around the museum and find ways, which is something that obviously the curators in the exhibitions had to deal with as well. And so but I think it was but it's also like, you know, just trying experiences like that, then it means that you broaden as well, like your audiences, and then you kind of you know, allow you allow this kind of culture of experimentation and excitement, like to grow and happen. And this is where I think, despite all the, you know, the logistical nightmares for making this happen, that was the exciting thing, to see this thing coming you know, alive at the end, and getting there, and just saying that, oh my gosh, I can't even remember how we brought this in, but it's great that it's here now. And so definitely, but yes, having these interdisciplinary teams, I think it's really important, because otherwise you just get used to one view of things, and then it's really important to have these different perspectives. And I think this is something that I find really interesting in working with other industries now here at FutureEverything, where we collaborate with tech industry, or like, for example, like last year, just before the pandemic, we curated and co-designed this space at the Cisco Live conference in Barcelona, which was like a crazy, you know, just construction, but it was amazing, because we just kind of realized that we could do anything there, and we collaborated with their amazing team, and it's good to get out of this kind of, you know, art gallery, you know, like thinking, and then think about like different formats, that yes, you can install artworks in like outside in the city, or you can install an artwork in a tech conference, or like in a crazy place. So it's good to kind of think beyond that kind of white box.
We always have to send a team that we choose to oversee installation or to quality control. Often it's a mix of, you know, the artist or artist studio members, you know, our own team, or our trusted vendors, you know, or freelancers or permalancers, to ensure that the artwork is installed the right way, because you can give them so many manuals, but, you know, you don't always know if they read them, and some you know, places just don't have the resources to have all that expertise. So that's also something we build in into the contract, and also budget within it. You know, it's not just a loan fee, you know, you have these travel costs. And then we, you know, depending on the institution, we were also trying to find, sponsorship for maybe a collector of that museum or something to help fund it, just so we can ensure that the artwork is shown. And then because of the pandemic, I started working with some of our artists on remote installation and kind of a mix of just doing it remotely with a smaller team on site. And I think that's going to be a trend kind of going forward, because it also takes a lot of time and resources if artists themselves have to travel for every install. It definitely wears them down. So, we want to become more trusted to be able to say, like, this is to the artist standards, or to have them there only a shorter period of time or less of them. That's what we're, striving to do.
Cool. I have a question, which is, do we imagine that we're talking a lot about kind of these types of artworks borrowing or collaborating with other industries in order to realize their full potential, instead of relying on, say, what an institution or a museum has already there, like what Anne said, like an electrician or an install crew that's used to doing one kind of thing, and you're trying to do this entire other universe. We ended up basically producing On View ourselves, which is helpful because we've also worked in experiential marketing and in that world. So we kind of like trained our production chops through corporate projects and then apply them to our art practice. But if we didn't have that experience, like, that piece would not have existed at all. So, but it's interesting to think about art and entertainment blurring together in this conversation. Sounds good and like it makes sense, and we're learning from that industry. But how do we then also make sure art doesn't kind of become entertainment or take on some of the qualities about entertainment that make it not art, or lose integrity because of partners that then have an agenda with why they're supporting these kinds of projects? That's something that we think about a lot, talk about a lot. I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Oh, you have a thought about it?
I have thought about it.
Oh, do you have thought about it?
Well, I mean, from the artist perspective, I definitely think that you run a risk when you need to, and as experiential art becomes more popular too, I think you run the risk of, if you're adopting methods and process and knowledge and know-how from big tech entertainment, you run the risk of sort of adopting things that you might not want to adopt as an artist. And I think in our case, we're quite critical of this with our own practice. And given that producing is a very important part of our art process, because there's, as all of us know,
the details are not the details.
Yes. And there's so, we can create a design. Todd, you were asking, did you formulate something about the bit of, did you formulate this like idea that it would be, I don't know, either at the scale or at this complexity? I mean, for us, we don't think about the manual, the modularity when we go to create the idea and the concept that then feeds everything else. We know that at a certain point, we kind of have to get intimate and close to the cuff of what this idea is. And then we then very quickly move into a design phase, which is really, really interesting, because I think, also as a trained designer, there's this like long history of designers saying, I'm not an artist.
I'm a designer.
I'm a designer, and I am above being an artist, right?
I have rules.
And artists being like, I'm not a designer, but we use design as a key part of our process after we've done the art part, right? And then in that design and production process, when we're choosing materials and we're told by whoever's commissioning, you don't have enough money for $12 a square foot for this material you want on your floor. And we're like, okay. And then we're like, okay, what other materials? And there are so many decisions that happen after the design or the art vision aspect, that then you have to make all these micro decisions that develop an entirely new artwork. So the art for us and the production are part of the same process after we've done the vision work. But I think that sort of the artist being active in the producing work, I think is key for it not to be swallowed into, hey, well, you could do this thing and use this preset.
It's like, sure, whatever you think.
Because the art, but anyway,
Well, but okay, but even the semantic differentiation between artist and designer, doesn't that seem like remarkably unnecessary?
Yeah, totally.
It does.
I mean, like going back to okay, if you're working with a tech company, if you were working with a massive entertainment conglomerate, like the motivation that somebody has to alter or augment a design, I think it's like you have to suss that out on an individual basis. So if you're working with a massive tech company, you recognize that regardless of what they say, the core of the company is transactional. So maybe they afford you some capability that you would not otherwise have, but you kind of need to have a healthy and pleasant distrust of everything that they say to you, if your motivation is to create something that actually, like, if the purpose of art is not to sell it, if the purpose of art is to elucidate part of the human condition in a way that cannot otherwise be understood, then okay, then you're going to have to fight and claw and scream and do and pick different materials or whatever it is, so you can actually get to that point where you can reach out to the public and say, I want to give you this because I think it will help being alive. And if your point, and I'm not actually making a judgment here, if your point is to say, I want to make a piece of art, and there are very, very famous artists who do this, that will sell for the most amount of money to the most people. And I want this because I'm very interested in sweaters or cars or islands or whatever motivates them. Then they become that thing. But like we are melding all of these different disciplines and needs and capabilities through all sorts of different industries to make these things. And like, we are ostensibly sitting here talking about digital art, and I mean, yes, it's technology, it's new, it's evolving, and we do our best to create something that's meaningful to the public. But what's funny about it is, if we're most successful, then the technology itself is noticed least. Like, if we do really well, if we do our jobs really well, then nobody notices I had to wear this device, or I saw artifacting on whatever the image was. They just have an emotional response to it. And so ultimately, I feel like that's kind of the core of what we're doing. It's using technology to avoid technology.
Yes. Agree. Thoughts?
Poetry.
Mic drop.
I had something to say, but now I forgot.
I totally agree. Art should not be a tech demo. That's
Yes.
the number one compass for digital art.
Yes.
Art should not be a tech demo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, yeah, and it shouldn't be an Instagrammable moment. I think, or just spectacle. And I think that's another important differentiation between, entertainment and art. And look, I think Instagram is a useful tool for an artist. So many people can have visibility to your work in the digital way, by social media. And I think it's another tool that, audiences can get to know, you and your artwork on a different level. It definitely gives more access. But, yeah, we don't want people to come and just take a selfie and that's it. They're not like experiencing it. There's this really magical piece in the show that was probably the most complicated artwork I've ever worked on. It took over a year to design and produce, and it's premiering for the first time in the show. It's Team Lab's Massless Clouds sculpture Between Life. And you walk into this mirrored room and there are floating clouds, like gigantic sculptural forms that like rotate through the space, and you can walk through them. And, and as things kind of break apart, it references, like things in life, it can meld back together and might be so broken down that then it collapses and fades away. And it's just all about how life is a system of energy and, this kind of circle of life and regeneration. And, it took architects, engineers, EV integrator, we imported things from all over the world and had it fabricated all over. It's thousands of parts. It's plumbing, mechanical, electrical, it's everything. But when you're inside, you don't think about any of that. And on the opening day, I saw like kids just like loving it, just being like, wow, and just have this like sense of magic. And, no one in there is thinking like, oh, like,
nice plumbing.
Nice plumbing. Like, what are the environmental conditions? Like, how long did it take, to install it and fabricate
really
it?
blended these projectors just
Perfect.
Yeah, it has LEDs and sensors and, it has everything. So anyways, that's one of the most complicated, but yet like magical works that I've worked on.
I really can't wait to see that.
I can't wait.
Yeah,
Me
just
too.
everyone let me know when you're in Miami. Good chance I'll be there, and I'd love to give you all a tour.
Any other concluding thoughts or questions that we can all
or thoughts that don't
be left
conclude.
with? Yeah, thoughts that conclude or not, or even questions are nice to end with as well, I think.
Ooh, questions. Questions, no answers.
I have one thing that is going to sound probably kind of dense, but a year from now, I would like to get this exact group together again and see how much of this was predictably accurate and how much we would change our opinion of in the course of a calendar year.
I love that.
Love.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Can't wait.
Wow.
Just
And
also like how this discussion has influenced, will influence whatever we're doing this year.
yeah, well, Anne, I definitely want to see your piece hopefully in 2 weeks.
Yay. Yeah. When do you arrive?
I hope the 24th.
You have a wishful ticket on the 23rd.
Wishful ticket.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually worked before. Getting into Japan to shoot Ryuichi in December when Americans weren't allowed in there.
Oh.
It actually, some of that, it's wishful thinking, yeah, and weird energetic stuff, but sometimes it works.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm curious to know also in our 1 year part two, our 1 year reunion, how much has changed, because I feel like every day we're reading about new institutions and galleries starting to like adapt. And I think for a long time people were avoiding this. They were like, we'll just pretend digital isn't happening and we'll like keep going and just hope that it like fizzles out. And I feel like we're past that point where institutions are now like, when are we going to have to start really paying attention and showing these kinds of works? Or maybe some will and they'll become the leaders in this, and others will be like, we're going to stick to what we've always done, and others will be like, we're going to charge forward. But I'm curious, I'm sure there'll be a lot of institutional change.
If you think about it, the traditional institutions that continue doing what they've always done, I mean, there is value to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But because we're working really hard for the right reasons to make things that are new, then we'll actually, I mean, it gives us in many ways more of a platform, simply because if absolutely everybody was doing it, it would have already been co-opted by beer companies anyway. So right now is the time that we can do kind of whatever we want.